The biggest search for the Loch Ness monster in more than half a century is underway this weekend in Scotland. Hundreds of people are taking part in the effort to capture evidence of Nessie's existence.
Loch Ness has been haunted by stories of a monster.
I saw the monster at 10 minutes to 10 on the 26th of May 2007.
After decades of speculation, a new scientific mission has mapped every inch of the lake. What began as a myth, whispered across the Scottish Highlands, changed when the sonar lit up with something massive moving under the water. For the first time, science had met the legend face to face, and it was shocking. To make sense of what researchers found, we have to go back to the beginning. Long before sonar scans and DNA tests, this quiet Scottish lake had already earned a reputation that defied explanation. The Loch of Legends. If you ever stand on the edge of Loch Ness, the first thing you'll notice isn't the view, it's the silence. The top of the lake looks still and almost motionless. However, despite the calmness, there is something unsettling in there. This stretch of water runs 23 miles through the Scottish Highlands, carving a path between steep, mist-covered hills before fading into the fog near Inverness. It looks ordinary from a distance, but to be honest, nothing about this place is ordinary. Beneath that quiet surface lies one of the deepest bodies of fresh water in the world. In some parts, Loch Ness plunges to about 755 feet, basically deeper than the North Sea in certain areas. This depth alone gives it a kind of presence, as if the Earth itself created a hiding place no light could reach. The loch holds more water than all the lakes in England and Wales combined. It's vast enough to swallow entire towns, yet still keep its secrets untouched. Also, the water itself adds to the mystery. It's cold, dark, and stained by peat from the surrounding hills. Even on a clear day, the surface reflects almost nothing. It seems like it's too dark to show the sky. Once you descend a few feet below, sunlight disappears completely. Divers say it's like falling through layers of ink until everything goes silent. Down there, visibility is nearly zero, and sound moves in strange ways, echoing faintly as if the loch has its own voice. It's no wonder that anyone who's ever looked into it feels an odd pull, in the sense that the darkness beneath might be watching back. From the shoreline, though, Loch Ness plays tricks. It appears calm, still, and maybe even beautiful. The ripples seem harmless, the air soft and quiet. Yet, that calmness hides something ancient. The terrain below is rugged and uneven, carved thousands of years ago by forces powerful enough to reshape the land itself. When the last ice age ended about 10,000 years ago, massive glaciers cut through the Great Glen Fault, leaving behind a deep trench. Also, when the ice melted, that trench became filled with water, creating the loch we see today. Every layer of rock down there shows that nature has always ruled here. And when you finally stand there, staring into its dark waters, it's easy to understand why people began whispering about what might be lurking beneath. The loch's design alone invites the imagination to wander. What could move through that black water unseen? What might have made its home in a trench untouched since the Ice Age? The surface may look calm, but somewhere below it, in the pitch-black stillness, the story of Loch Ness begins to stir. If there was ever a place built to hide something, it would look exactly like this. Curiosity might have drawn modern explorers to Loch Ness, but ancient people approached it with caution. Could the earliest people around Loch Ness have known something we're only now rediscovering? Ancient warnings. The Celtic myths. Long before technology tried to uncover Loch Ness's mysteries, the land around it was already speaking through stories. The ancient Celtic tribes who settled near its shores saw the water not as peaceful, but as something unpredictable. They treated it with caution, respect, and fear. To them, The loch wasn't a postcard view. It was a living presence, something that demanded distance. Their stories weren't meant to entertain. They were more like warnings that were shaped by generations who learned the hard way what could happen when you ignored the loch's mood. One of the most chilling tales was that of the Kelpie, a shape-shifting water spirit said to wander the shorelines disguised as a beautiful horse. To a regular traveler, it looked harmless. Its coat gleams like a wet glass, its stance calm, eyes locked on you as if inviting you closer. However, the story always took a darker turn. The moment someone reached out to touch it, their hand would stick to its skin, unable to pull away. The creature would suddenly leap into the water, dragging its victim deep into the black, silent depths from which no one returned. The story spread not through fantasy, but through fear, reminding you to keep your distance from what glitters too easily. Another story told of the Ichwiska, the water horse. It was said to be far more ruthless than the Kelpie. It could appear as a man or a horse, sometimes both, always drawing people in with its strange presence. Folklorists later described it as one of the most dangerous creatures in Celtic belief. In the old stories, it didn't wait for you to approach. It watched, waited, and acted when you were alone near the water's edge. People claimed it could tear apart a grown man because its appetite is as vast as the loch itself. Whether anyone truly saw it or not, the idea was enough to make generations treat the loch's calm surface as a warning sign rather than an invitation. You see, these stories weren't told to amuse or fascinate anyone. They talked about the unexplained drownings, the sudden waves, and the people who vanished while fishing or crossing at night. These tribes didn't separate reality from superstition. The two existed together. When something disappeared in the dark water, it wasn't an accident. It was an encounter. The water carried weight, and every little effect felt personal, as though something unseen had decided to remind people who was in control. Then, in the year 565 AD, the mystery around Loch Ness came in a written form. Saint Columba, an Irish missionary traveling through what is now Scotland, came upon a group of locals burying a man near the River Ness, the particular river that flows directly out of the loch. When he asked what happened, they told him the man had been attacked while swimming by a great water beast. Columba, unmoved, ordered one of his followers to swim across and retrieve a boat. As the man entered the water, a massive creature surfaced, its jaws wide, surging toward him. What happened next is what secured the loch's place in history. Columba raised his hand, made the sign of the cross, and shouted a command. "You will go no further and won't touch the man. Go back at once." According to his followers, the beast froze, turned away, and sank back into the dark. The account, written later by Saint Adamnan, continues to stir debate. Was it divine intervention, a misunderstanding, or an actual encounter with something living in the loch's depths? No one can say for sure. What is certain is that this moment turned the loch's whispered fears into something permanent and something recorded. Centuries later, the story still holds power. Historians question its accuracy, yet its impact is undeniable. It transformed the loch from a mysterious landscape into a place of deeper meaning. It became a crossroads between faith, fear, and folklore. Even now, people who stand by its edge speak of a feeling they can't explain. The air is colder, and the silence feels heavier. The stories of the Kelpie, the Ichwiska, and Columba's beast may come from different times, but they share the same pulse. It feels like an unspoken understanding that the water keeps its secrets well. Until that moment, belief in the creature depended on faith and fear. But by the time a photo entered the story, everything changed. Or maybe that's when the real trick began. The photograph that fooled the world. The story of the photo starts in April 1934, when the world's fascination with Loch Ness took a dramatic turn. Across Britain, newspapers carried a single black and white photograph that would change everything about Loch Ness. It showed a long, slender neck rising from the dark water, still and eerie, almost prehistoric. To readers of that time, it wasn't fantasy. It was proof. Because back then, altering photographs wasn't easy. It took time, skill, and effort that only a few could manage. So, when the image appeared, no one thought twice about its authenticity. The photo fit perfectly with the stories locals had been telling for years about a mysterious creature with a curved neck and silent movements across the loch. Immediately, the photograph spread like wildfire. Headlines captured the imagination of readers from London to New York. People flocked to the Scottish Highlands, hoping to catch a glimpse of what they now believed lived in those shadowy waters. The calm, quiet loch suddenly became a stage, and every small thing looked suspicious. Also, tour boats began to fill, and cameras pointed toward the mist. The mystery had become a spectacle before anyone knew it. The public gave it a name called Nessie. Over the next few decades, more evidence surfaced to keep the story alive. In 1960, an amateur investigator named Tim Dinsdale filmed a dark, moving shape crossing the loch, leaving a wide wake behind it. The footage was grainy, but it stirred global debate. Some claimed it was a boat. Others swore it was alive. But nobody could really tell. Years later, in the 1970s, another image sprung up. This one was a supposed flipper, diamond-shaped and pale, captured under the water. It looked like a prehistoric marine creature called a plesiosaur. Once again, everyone believed it. The Loch Ness mystery was no longer just a tale. It was becoming an empire. Soon, the story inspired books, documentaries, and endless theories. Toy makers built their own versions of Nessie. Filmmakers created movies about what might be hiding in the loch's depths. Scientists joined expeditions with sonar and cameras. The loch wasn't only water anymore. It was a promise of discovery, a reflection of humanity's hunger for the unknown. People wanted to believe that somewhere, in the deep silence, a creature had survived the passage of time. Then, 60 years after the famous photo, the truth began to unravel. In 1994, an elderly man named Christian Sperling made a confession that stunned believers around the world. The image that fooled millions, he said, was no monster at all. It was a small model, more like a toy submarine with a sculpted neck and head attached. He had built it himself, alongside his stepfather, Marmaduke Wetherill, as a revenge on the newspaper that had mocked Wetherill's earlier efforts. The revelation felt like a punch to the gut. People who had grown up with that photo felt deceived. For decades, it had represented mystery and hope. Now, it was revealed to be nothing more than an elaborate prank. Some accepted it with disappointment, others refused to believe it at all. They claimed there had to be more to the story, that maybe the confession itself was part of another cover-up. The debate raged on, as fierce as ever. And even with the truth exposed, the fascination never faded. Tourists still come, cameras ready, eyes fixed on the same stretch of dark water where the monster once seemed to rise. The photo may have been fake, but the feeling it sparked was real. That's the strange thing about mysteries, because even when they're solved, they never really die. The photograph may have fooled the world, but it also reminded people that sometimes believing is more thrilling than knowing. For years, people relied on cameras and eyewitnesses to tell the story of Loch Ness. But what happens when science decides to listen instead of look? The sonar revolution. By the early 1960s, the era of grainy photographs and campfire tales was giving way to something more scientific, and the world no longer wanted distant effects or eyewitness claims. They wanted measurable proof. That desire sparked the creation of the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau, the first organized group determined to track down whatever had stirred those waters for generations. This time, they weren't relying on binoculars or blind luck. Their weapon was sonar, a technology that could see with sound, piercing where light could not. In a lake where light faded almost instantly and the water ran black with peat, vision was useless. Sound, however, could pierce the depths. The teams dragged sonar equipment through the water, sending out waves that bounced back from anything solid. What they saw on their screens sent waves of curiosity across the scientific community at large, moving signals far bigger than any known fish. Were these readings the first real clues? Or were they another illusion in a place famous for tricking the eye and the mind? Now, the real test arrived in 1987. It was called Operation Deep Scan. This was a mission on a scale no one had attempted before. Led by naturalist Adrian Shine, a fleet of about 24 boats lined up across the loch in perfect formation, each carrying advanced sonar gear. The plan was to sweep every corner of the lake in one coordinated pass. It cost more than £1 million, but to the world, it promised valuable answers. For a moment, it seemed those answers had arrived. One of the sonar systems picked up a massive object over 600 feet down, moving slowly through the cold darkness. Sonar expert Daryl Lowrance, who examined the readings, couldn't hide his surprise. "I believe there is definitely something deep down that is bigger than a fish," he said. "I tend to think it's a seal." However, almost immediately, the signal vanished. Before anyone could close in, whatever it was had disappeared without a trace. The press quickly branded the operation a disappointment, calling it a £1 million failure. But that wasn't entirely true. The thing is, the sonar had recorded 3 large, unexplained contacts, each one too big to be a fish and too real to be dismissed. Those blips stayed in the record books and in the minds of everyone who believed something extraordinary still moved in that lake. Loch Ness has never been an easy place to study. Its enormous size makes it nearly impossible to cover completely. Anything could hide there for years. It could be an animal, a log, or perhaps something even stranger. Scientists and believers both understood that whatever lives in those waters most definitely knows how to keep secrets. After the boats returned to shore, the excitement slowly gave way to reflection. Maybe those mysterious signals were schools of fish. Maybe they were drifting debris. Or maybe they were something science still couldn't name. The results offered no clear proof, yet they refused to close the case. But what if the key wasn't in what could be seen or heard, but in what could be traced? Could modern science finally read the story written in its water? The DNA breakthrough. Science finally speaks. For years, the hunt for the Loch Ness creature had been all about cameras, sonar scans, and hopeful eyes staring at the water. But in 2018, something completely different happened. A team led by Professor Neil Gemmell from the University of Otago in New Zealand decided to stop chasing shadows and decided to go through science. Instead of trying to spot the creature, they asked a new question. What if it's already left clues behind? This question gave room to an idea called environmental DNA, or eDNA. It's based on a simple truth. Every living thing leaves traces of itself in its surroundings. Whether it's a fish shedding scales, an otter dropping hair, or a bird leaving waste, each fragment carries genetic information. By collecting and analyzing water from the loch, Gemmell's team hoped to build a living map of everything that calls it home. If something mysterious lurked in those waters, its DNA would be there too. For 2 long weeks in June 2018, they scoured the entire loch. From the calm surface to the cold, dim waters far below, every part was sampled. About 250 water samples were gathered, filtered, and tested in high-tech labs. The team wasn't chasing blurry shapes anymore. They were now hunting for hard evidence, proof that couldn't be argued with or staged. And what they found was much more complex than anyone imagined. When the results arrived, the sheer scale was staggering. Over 500 million DNA sequences were uncovered, representing nearly 3,000 species. Most were tiny, more like microscopic life forms, plankton and bacteria. But others painted a familiar picture of the loch's residents, like the salmon, pike, char, and plenty of eels. Surprisingly, even land animals such as deer, dogs, rabbits, and humans had left their genetic footprints behind. One strange sample even showed nothing but pheasant DNA, likely from a bird that had found its way into the water. It was as if the entire ecosystem had spoken all at once. But what truly caught everyone's attention was what was not found. Basically, there was no DNA from ancient reptiles, no trace of massive sturgeon or catfish, and nothing absolutely connected to any creature from the age of dinosaurs. It was a quiet blow to one of the loch's oldest myths. Still, one discovery stood out. Across all the tests, a clear pattern emerged as eel DNA appeared in almost every single sample from each part of the loch. The sheer amount of it was so unusual that Gemmell couldn't help but say, "There is a very significant amount of eel DNA. Eels are very plentiful in Loch Ness, with eel DNA found at pretty much every location sampled. There are a lot of them." This single comment reignited the world's imagination. Could those mysterious sightings have been enormous eels all along? Well, it wasn't an easy theory to dismiss. Later calculations suggested that while regular-sized eels are common in the loch, the odds of one growing to massive proportions are extremely slim. Still, people couldn't stop thinking about it. What if the creature everyone feared wasn't a monster at all, but an animal nature simply forgot to limit? Ultimately, the DNA study didn't reveal a prehistoric survivor or a mythical beast. What it did uncover was a thriving, mysterious ecosystem where life leaves invisible fingerprints everywhere. The water had spoken for the first time, and what it said challenged decades of imagination. For many, this was the turning point. The chase was no longer about catching a glimpse of something breaking the surface. It became a search for meaning in the smallest traces of life. Even with DNA results in hand, something about Loch Ness still didn't add up. The data was clear, yet the stories wouldn't die. Could it be that not everything in the loch can be filtered, measured, or named? Do you believe Nessie is real or just a folklore? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss any of our uploads. To enjoy more content like this, click on the next video on your screen.